Doing anything with kids is tricky. Applying for a passport is no exception. But here's the thing. Most of the mistakes people make when trying to apply for a child's passport happen before they even leave their house. Hey there, I'm Sheldon with USPassportServiceGuide.com, and if you're traveling with kids, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button because you are going to get the information you need to make sure you don't make the most common mistakes that prevent you from getting a passport for your minor child. Be sure to stick around until the end because we have some resources and some tips that will help you make sure this process goes as smoothly as possible. Let's get into it. Listen, on the surface, it seems like getting a passport for a child should be simple, right? You just need some pictures, fill out a form, go to an appointment, bang, you got a passport. Unfortunately, it isn't that simple, and there are so many little mistakes that can lead to you not getting what you need. Why is that an issue? It could cost you weeks of potential travel time just because you screwed up one document or you forgot to include one piece of documentation. So what's the number one mistake that stops most families cold when it comes to taking an international trip with their families? Well, it's not the passport application. It's not even the passport photo. It's another piece of documentation that is specific to applying for a minor's passport. It's parental consent. Ideally, when you go to a passport appointment, you need to bring not only the child who needs the passport, but both parents. From a safety perspective, this makes sense. You don't want a situation where one parent is getting a passport for a child, takes them out of the country, and the other parent is caught completely unaware. So you have two options. Either both parents appear at the appointment and they bring photo ID to show that they are, in fact, the parents of this particular child, or there's a form you can use. DS-3053 is a document that allows one parent to give signed notarized consent so that the other parent can be the one to take the child to the appointment and both don't have to appear. There's a lot of reasons why this may happen. Work schedules, availability, or just physical proximity. It may just be simpler for one adult to go with the child. Now again, that must be notarized. That's not a form you can just fill out on your way out the door. You have to plan ahead. But I can already hear you asking, but what about single parents? Well, there's an exception for that too. To avoid having to fill out DS-3053, you need to make sure you have some kind of proof that you are a parent with sole custody of the child who's getting the passport. So what documentation actually works? Well, a court order that gives sole custody to one parent, that'll work. A death certificate showing that the other parent is deceased, that will work. Or the child's birth certificate, if it only lists one parent, that's the parent that needs to be with the child when they're applying. So anything outside of those scenarios I just described, you're going to get turned away. Your child is not going to get a passport. Anyone who's applied for a passport will tell you there's a ton of paperwork. But for a child, you can triple it because you need documentation not only for the child, but for each of the parents as well. The heartbreaking thing is, I've literally seen families walking into a passport appointment, big folios filled with all sorts of documentation, and then they have to turn around and do the walk of shame back to the parking lot because they were missing one thing, or they submitted a copy of something that needed to be an original. So you want to make sure you have all of these items in the exact form that the State Department is asking for. So let's start with a big one, birth certificates. They need to be original with seals. They can't be photocopies. Now, you may say, hey, wait a minute, it says on the application I need to bring photocopies. That's true, but you need to bring the originals as well. If you don't have them, it's game over. Same thing with the parents' IDs. You have to bring the originals. You need photocopies of both sides of those documents as well, but the originals have to be with you at the appointment. The people who are processing your application need to make sure you are who you say you are, and your child does go with you. And then one that's pretty obvious, I've seen passport photos of children where the children are moving and they're squirming and they're blurry and they're not centered and the head's too small, or there are objects or toys or pacifiers in the image, or a hand of a parent trying to keep the child still. All those things lead to a rejection. You're going to need to get a passport photo taken where your child's head is featured in that 2 by 2 inch square, just like everybody else. We have a whole video about that, as well as links in the description for our best tips for taking the perfect picture, even of a child, all the way as young as an infant. Here's another mistake we see all the time, and it happens actually after your application has been processed. Sometimes parents opt to just get a passport card for their minor children instead of getting a passport book. And that's fine. If you're planning to travel to one of the areas where a passport card is accepted, Mexico, Canada, the Bahamas, Bermuda, that's great. However, you can only drive to those places or enter seaports of entry. If you want to fly to one of those places, passport card won't work. Adult or child, it doesn't matter. Let's be real. There are scenarios where only having a passport card actually becomes a risk, it becomes a danger, because say there's a medical emergency, either with your family while you're traveling, or for some reason you need to get back home quickly. A plane's going to be your fastest option. Faster than a car, faster than a train, faster than a boat. However, if all you have is a passport card, you can't board an international flight. It's just not possible. And even if your entire family has passport books and your one child has a passport card, that child cannot get on a plane. So you're going to have to find alternative modes of transportation, and it's going to cost you valuable time, especially in an emergency. So I get it. The passport card is really appealing for both minors and adults because it's really affordable. Like, let's break down the costs here. For a child, a passport card is only $15, and then you have to pay $35 in your application fee, so it brings the grand total up to $50. But that's not that bad. A passport book costs $100 plus that same $35 administrative fee, taken to $135. $135, $50. You don't have to be a math whiz to see that $50 is way more affordable. But again, it's limited. You can't use it to board a plane, and that leaves you very vulnerable in an emergency. Now, you could do both. You could get a passport book and a passport card at the same time. So that brings your total to $115 for the book and the card, plus that $35 administrative fee, which you only have to pay once. Now, you do have the option to get the book and the card together, so that's $115, but then you only have to pay that administrative fee one time, that $35 fee. So that brings your total to $150. So for whatever reason, if you decide that, you know what, having a passport card makes sense for my child, but you want to maintain that flexibility to fly if you need to, the book and card combination is a good one. If you have to pick one over the other, always go with the book unless you have a very specific reason where a card is good enough. So what if you need to get a passport for a child quickly, whether it's because you're in an emergency situation and you need one, or you just have booked travel coming up and you want to get there as soon as possible? Well, routine service is going to take you anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks from the point of application to when your passport arrives in the mail. Now, you also have to add in shipping time, so that could add an extra week or so depending on whether or not you pay for expedited shipping. Now, you can also pay for expedited passport processing. That cuts the wait time to 2 to 3 weeks. It's great. You got to pay an extra $60 per passport to do it, but if you have a pressing travel need, that may be the way to go. Now, if you have an urgent travel need, meaning you can prove that you're traveling somewhere within the next 2 weeks, you can still spend that $60, but you can either go to a regional passport agency or hire a passport expediting service, and they will get that passport for you as quickly as the same day, but at the longest 14 days out. The major difference with emergency and urgent passports is it has to go through a regional passport agency. You're not simply going to your local post office or library, the general passport acceptance facilities you would go to if you were just doing a normal or an expedited passport application. These urgent needs require you to go to one of the 26 regional passport agencies scattered across the United States. Depending on where you live, that may be both time and cost prohibitive, especially if you're traveling with a child, because they have to be there at the appointment. This is a case where a passport expediting service may make more sense. You still have to go through the hoops of getting your picture taken and getting the application processed, but then you can hand a lot of this to an expediter to do things on your behalf and cut your wait times down. Once you have that passport in hand, another thing to consider is if your child is traveling and they're not traveling with both parents, you're going to want to fill out a minor travel consent form. What this is a legally binding document that you can bring with you and share with customs agents, TSA agents, international officials to show that whoever is traveling with your child as their chaperone has the legal right to do so. We have a completely free version available on our website for you to download, customize, and use as you would like. Just make sure you get it notarized, make sure you have some copies, and make sure everyone traveling with your child has a copy of that document so you can avoid problems while you travel. We'll throw a link to that in the description so you can check that out on your own. So to recap, make sure when you're applying for a minor passport, you got to bring both parents. You got to make sure you have the proper documentation and the proper photocopies of the things that need additional copies. And when you're filling out that application, unless you have a very specific reason not to, make sure you're checking an option to get a passport book instead of a passport card. Part of being a parent is always being prepared for the unexpected. Having a passport book gives you a little bit more flexibility in doing that. Speaking of issues, what if your child's passport gets damaged while you're traveling? Maybe it becomes an impromptu coloring book. Maybe it gets thrown in the pool. Maybe it quite simply just gets lost. What do you do? That's a whole other problem. Check out our video on damaged passports to figure out how you can solve it. Have any more questions? Drop them in the comments. Safe travels, everybody.